We're under a fire ban. Figures, right? The night we come hunting for a monster, the desert outlaws are light. So here we are. No flame, no lantern, just the dark and whatever's breathing under the salt.
Up the ruckus, got money wired, no denying. Always like to play with fire.
Pull up close to the fire, mi gente, even if tonight the flame's only in your mind. You ever notice how the wind off Salt Lake burns the skin colder than it should? They say it's because the air's full of ghosts that never washed clean.
Out here, west of the Wasatch, the Great Salt Lake stretches like a mirror someone forgot to polish. On clear days, it shines like heaven, even picking up hues of pink. But on bad ones, it smells like hell's bathwater. Seriously, 0 stars. Do not recommend if you have a sensitive nose. And somewhere out there, under the brine and the bones, they say a monster sleeps.
The story starts in 1877. 2 salt work laborers stayed late to load wagons. Night came fast. The lake went still. Then the water rose. They said a creature broke the surface, horse head, crocodile body, 30 feet long. It charged the shore, bellowed like thunder, and then vanished back into the foam.
Newspapers ran it for weeks. The North Shore Monster. The Desert News called it a terrible visitation. People came riding out just to stare at the water, waiting for bubbles or any sign to verify the story with their own eyes. Some swore they saw ripples miles long. Others said men had just been drinking the refinery spirits. You know how frontier towns get. Half science, half sermon, lots of booze. But our story doesn't end there. By 1880, fishermen near Springville claimed they saw something serpent-shaped with humps sliding through the waves, moving faster than wind. But unlike the tales of Nessie, each man in this situation drew it differently. One saw scales, one saw feathers, one saw a face like a horse.
Then there's the Stansbury Isle tale. 2 hunters, decades later, said they were chased into a cave by a winged creature. Horse head, crocodile hide, but this time it had wings wider than a barn door. They hid till dawn, swearing it came back carrying a cow. Could have been the heat mirage, could have been something the desert wanted them to see.
But even before the settlers came with their shovels and their scriptures, people of these shores already knew the lake could sing. They told stories of the water babies, spirits of children claimed by the lake before they got a chance to walk the earth. The Shoshone said you could hear them when the moon hung low, crying out from the reeds like infants left behind. But the warning is, those weren't cries for help. They were invitations to be joined with the lake for eternity.
The story goes that a fisherman once followed those cries, thinking someone had overturned a boat. He found a tiny handprint in the mud, fresh and wet, but no boat and no baby. The next morning, his skiff drifted ashore without him. When they lifted it, the wood beneath the seat was scorched as if struck by lightning, but from below. They say he'd been taken, pulled into the deep by the children who never got to grow up.
The tribes believed they weren't evil, just lonely. But when the settlers came, the story shifted. The water babies became demons, sirens, omens. Mothers told their kids, don't play near the lake or the babies will cry for company. And maybe that fear wasn't entirely superstition, because sometimes when the wind cuts right through the salt crust, you can still hear those soft, wet sobs, like the lake remembering every voice it's ever swallowed.
That's the thing about monsters. The land gives them names long before we do. We just forget the language. So when we hear it again, it sounds like fear.
The lake didn't stop making ghosts when the old stories ended. It just gave them new names. In the year 2000, a woman named Nikki Bacoles, I don't know if I'm saying that right, she disappeared after moving to Utah to start over. They found her bones months later near Saltair. a lonely stretch where the amusement pavilion once stood, kind of like it was Salt Lake's crown. Until they knew her name, they called her Saltair Sally.
People still see her out there. White dress, long hair, standing at the waterline where the sand turns black. Sometimes she waves, sometimes she just stares, like she's waiting for a ride that never came. Drivers swear she appears in their headlights, drenched and silent, before vanishing into the mist. One ranger said his radio crackled with a woman's voice whispering his own name while he was alone on patrol. He left the job 2 weeks later.
They say she walks the South Shore because that's where she was found. But I think it's because that's where the lake hides its dead best. It doesn't devour them. We witnessed lines of bones while we walked the shores, letting us know the lake, well, it keeps them, preserved in salt, perfect and eternal, the same way grief keeps love.
Some claim she's not just a ghost, but a guide, a guardian for those who lose their way on the flats, warning them before the fog rolls in too thick to escape. Others think she's just the latest face of the beast itself, proof that whatever dwells beneath the salt always needs a new story, a new name, and a new body to wear.
Speaking of the beast, we can't forget Lily E. Gray. Her headstone sits quiet up in Salt Lake City Cemetery. Under her name, Victim of the Beast 666.
Some say the beast was the government. Some say the devil. Some whisper it was the same monster that haunted this lake. Her husband Elmer engraved the words. He told anyone who'd listen she'd been taken by men in suits, by demons, by the beast. Records say natural causes, but the grave pulls visitors like a magnet, and the salt in the air follows them home. 3 stories.
3 echoes.
The water babies who cry for company, Saltair Sally who wanders for recognition, and Lily Gray whose warning is carved into the stone for anyone who wandered to the lake. Maybe the beast beneath the salt isn't one creature at all. Maybe it's every voice this lake refused to release.
Of all the stories that cling to this lake, I think my favorite is probably also the most ridiculous. All right, ready? They say a railroad man, bored of steel and the desert, well, he imported whales, like actual whales, to amuse the travelers. A pair of them, actually. And then released, like, living carnival acts into the water that's twice as salty as the sea. The papers never confirmed it, but for decades after, locals swore they heard them singing in the dark. Low, aching calls rolling across the flats, echoing against the mountain walls. Some say the salt preserved them, turned them into white brine ghosts that still swim just beneath the moonlit surface, unable to dive deeper. And honestly, if you've ever stood on this shore at midnight and heard that hollow song, it's easy to believe something enormous is moving out there. And it kind of sounds lonely.
Others laugh it off and say it's just a mirage. Heat shimmer, reflection, maybe a trick of light catching a floating log. Maybe. But the sound people describe doesn't bend with heat. It moves with intent. A deep, rhythmic bellow that rolls for miles, as if the lake itself were inhaling and exhaling through a cracked lung of glass. Every scientist seems to go quiet when you ask them, what breathes out there? Machine or echo of wind?
Maybe that's the monster's real. Maybe it's the shape our minds make when we stare too long at vast emptiness. The lake swallows sound. It takes life. It even captures the bodies that fall into it and preserves them in salt until they're more statue than bone. If ghosts need a home, this place offers both water and silence in abundance.
Every culture builds a monster. This one just happens to smell like sulfur and hiss like steam. Because it's easier, isn't it? To fear what moves under the surface than to face what we keep pouring into it, our waste, our worry, our own reflections.
The Rangers still get reports. Lights moving over the water where no boats should be. Blue-white orbs drifting against the wind, vanishing the moment anyone blinks. They say the shadows swim against the current, like the lake itself has veins that pulse backwards. One woman, a nurse driving home from the night shift, swore her dash cam caught something rising from the shallows. A neck, slick, pale, almost luminous, glistening white as bone. But when she pulled over, the screen in her car froze. When she pressed play on the recording, the image was gone. On the audio, there was a single wet inhale that lasted a little too long to be human. She deleted the file, but says her phone still plays the sound to her when she's trying to sleep.
And she's not the only one. Campers, truckers, even drone pilots, they all talk about things that don't record right. Footage erases itself, batteries drain. Something about this place refuses to be captured. Like the salt scrubs truth clean before it can even harden into evidence. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the proof isn't meant for cameras.
The stories keep shifting like the water. Sometimes it's a shape, sometimes a voice, sometimes a feeling pressing at the back of your neck. Every generation gives it a new name, and still can't explain why their hair sticks up in goosebumps when they talk about it.
Maybe that's all the evidence we ever get. No photos, no samples for a lab, just stories, still breathing, long after the witnesses are gone.
So what do you think? Monster? Mirage? Just a trick of light? Maybe a trick of guilt? Maybe it's the lake itself, angry at being drained, waking up from its own slow death to reclaim every reflection it's ever swallowed. Sometimes, I think we mistake consequences for creatures.
And sometimes, I think the beast is real. Not a thing with teeth and scales, but the presence you feel when you stand too close to the edge and the ground hums beneath your feet. The beast that waits in the places we've poisoned, where silence has learned to sing. Maybe it's what's left when the land finally decides it's done forgiving us.
Thank you for joining us for Ashes and Ocean's Fireside Legends, where every myth leaves a salt and ash ring behind.